Hello, welcome back to Bound and Unraveled. My name is Christina, and in today's video, we're going to be doing a readathon. Today's Saturday, and my flight is on Wednesday. Whenever it's the final days before a trip, I always get a little nervous and excited, in other words, anxious. And in order to keep the travel scaries away, I am going to challenge myself to read the 5 books that I left on my physical TBR for this trip, all of which are fairly short. This is for fun. It is a huge luxury to let myself spend so much time reading, so I want to lead with that. This is by no means a suggestion that we should all be trying to read a book a day or anything like that. This is just a little fun experiment for myself. It's kind of not serious. So, with all of that said, let's introduce the players in this week's readathon. First off, we have Virginia Woolf, To the Lighthouse. The blurb on the back is very sparse. It just says that it's the most autobiographical of her novels, and it explores adult relationships, marriage, and the changing class structure in the period spanning the Great War. I actually started this like a month ago, but I only got through the first 18 pages, and then I had a little bit of a pool accident, hence. Then we have Estas, muy callada by Ana Navajas, who is an Argentinian writer. The protagonist has just experienced the death of her mother and is reviewing memories of her childhood in a coastal town and then her present life in Buenos Aires. This was recommended to me by one of the booksellers at Abaco. I cheated. I started it yesterday when I was waiting for a doctor's appointment. Well, first off, the epigraph has a quote that says, "She doesn't do anything. She spends all day reading. There's thousands of things more useful to do, no?" Which feels funny and pointed, considering the purpose of this video. And the opening line is, "The cemetery where my mother is buried is my favorite garden," which I just think is immediately catching. And then we have another Abaco bookseller recommendation. I went in and I asked if the bookseller could recommend any books that are fantasy written by Latin American authors and set in Latin America, because to me, Latin America seems like the perfect place to be inspired for fantasy. Unfortunately, the bookseller told me that no, not really. To be clear, I said specifically that I didn't want magical realism, but he recommended this collection of short stories to me, which is an anthology of Latin American science fiction. Now, science fiction isn't usually my thing, but he specifically recommended this, saying that as a fantasy reader, I might really enjoy this. And I'll read you the blurb really quickly. It says, "Latin America is not the third world. It's not a possibility of development. It is a reality in which ancestral knowledge, science, realism, and fantasy collide." So I was really intrigued by this and I decided to follow the recommendation, and I'm really excited to read it. Okay, and then we have another Abaco bookseller recommendation. Shout out to my favorite bookstore in Cartagena, which is Donde Cantan las Ballenas by Sarah Jaramillo Klinkert. Candelaria, who's 12 years old and lives with her eccentric family in a mythical place lost in the mountains. Her mother talks with the stones, her stepbrother cultivates hallucinogenic mushrooms, and her father, an artist who sculpts whales, has abandoned the family. As the vegetation devours the house, they start to receive strange characters. The title and the cover were really cool to me, so I decided to give it a shot. And then finally, by Hector Faciolince, who's a really famous Colombian author and journalist, one of my all-time favorite nonfiction books is his book El olvido que seremos, and this is a book called Ahora la hora. He went to a book fair in Ukraine with a group of people, and on their last day, they went out for a goodbye dinner to a pizzeria, and they were hit by a Russian missile. And one of the people who died was a young Ukrainian author called Victoria Amelina, who was one of the guides and participants in this trip that he was taking. So he writes about this experience that he had. I'm really interested in this in general by what's going on in Ukraine. I really liked the way that he wrote about conflict here in Colombia, so I'm interested to see how he writes about this own lived experience in Ukraine. So as you can probably tell, these books have quite a few different tones, quite a few different vibes. I'm not going to read them in any particular order other than what I feel like reading next. So that's why I picked up and just started reading this one by Navajas yesterday. That's going to be the book that we start with. Thanks for coming along with me. I just finished our first book, and first things first, it's unclear to me whether this is a novel or autobiography. I think it's somewhere in between and autofiction. To be honest, this reads very much like someone's journal, and it was fine, very easy to read, but not in any way really meaningful, and it also wasn't fun. For me, it's totally fine if a book isn't particularly deep or, transformative or anything, as long as it's a fun read, but this was kind of just mid. That's it. I don't have more words because it was frankly so bland. We're gonna take our next book. Okay, next I want to read this one because I want something serious but that doesn't require a ton of brain power, and I think that this will hopefully do the trick. Hello, I'm checking in from about the halfway point. I'm really enjoying this so far. I mean, he's just a wonderful writer, and the way that he slowly builds up to the missile attack is compelling, and the way that he outlines each of the characters of the people who were with him at the time, including most notably Victoria Amelina, who I now really want to read. He includes a couple of quotes from her work, which are just really beautiful. So I'm enjoying this. The one thing I'll say is that this seems to have no visible structure. There are no chapters or real section breaks other than like these kinds of little stars. And personally, as a reader, I find it challenging because I'm very motivated by the act of finishing a chapter. I would say that's like one critique, but it's really not substantial. And also learning about the history between Ukraine and Russia and what's been going on. I mean, I've been following the news and everything, but it's quite different when you see it really illustrated by specific anecdotes and with photos and everything. And actually, I want to read one quote. He says on page 34, and again, I'm roughly translating from Spanish, "It's not geopolitics nor ideology, it's people who teach us to love and who give us a face and an identity to other nations." Through reading this book and his own experience of coming to know Ukraine, I feel like I'm getting a little bit of the after effects of that. And I'll just show you really quickly. Coco's been enjoying being out here on the terrace with me, enjoying the post-rain calm. So I have a good reading buddy. Hello, I'm checking in from Monday afternoon. I will say I do think it's going to be translated into English, so keep your eyes out for it. In summary, I would recommend reading this. It continued to be a very moving and personal account of one of the many crimes and tragedies committed by Russia and Ukraine. I think he summed up really well what he accomplished in this book. He writes on page 198, "What I have managed to write is, in the end, a second opportunity that Victoria didn't have, but which I have wanted to give voice, trying always to be loyal to her figure and to her inspiration. Here I've tried to occupy myself with one of many crimes, perhaps not the principal one, but yes, one of the more emblematic ones in the criminal campaign of Russia against Ukrainian civilians, and especially significant and painful for me because I was a direct witness of it." I think that sums it up perfectly. And I really appreciated how he transmitted Victoria as a person. I think that easily this could have been a bit icky, but what I think is most effective is that he includes excerpts from her own writing, which allows us to get to know her on her own terms. All of the quotes that he included, written by Victoria directly, were really striking to me. So now I'm really encouraged to go search out her writing. I'm actually going to try to include in the description box links to where you can find some of her writing in English. I really appreciated the way that he paid tribute to her. And then finally, with respect to my earlier critique about the structure of this book, I actually take that back a bit because I think maybe I was looking at this with too much of the eyes of someone expecting a traditional nonfiction book. And I think this is just something a little bit different. And you know what? I think that that's fair because he's writing this very clearly and very vividly from his own difficulty and attempt to come to terms with what happened, living with the post-traumatic stress. Anyway, I actually think that it wouldn't have made sense to try to include traditional chapters or sections. I enjoyed this. I found a lot of lines to underline. All right, one quick final note. One of its strengths, I think, for those of us who are outside of Ukraine and are not as familiar perhaps with what's going on, is that it's written by an outsider and follows his own process of understanding and really connecting with what's going on in Ukraine. It allowed me in some ways to go with Hector as he was understanding things and as he was experiencing them. Found that very compelling, and I think it's a good stepping stone to then go on and read accounts directly from Ukrainians themselves. Okay, now I'll let you go. The next book I want to read is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, mostly because I feel like reading something quite different and kind of escape to a different time period for a second. And this one's also quite short, even though the text is a little bit tiny. I think it's about 150 pages. So I will catch you there. Hi, good morning. It is Tuesday and it's our final full day here. And I want to check in with you about Virginia Woolf. This was an interesting book. I will be so honest and say I did not understand a lot of this book, especially at the beginning. It improved around the halfway point, and then I got kind of lost in the sauce again. It obviously, because it's Virginia Woolf, is written in a very stream of consciousness style, and it flits between different characters without a lot of separation or clear distinction. And okay, to give you some context, it starts off with those country parties that were common among the English upper classes one September before the First World War. And it really is kind of about the gender roles and the class distinctions and different dynamics that were kind of particular to that time. And you get those through that flitting from one character to the next. And it all kind of circles around a central character called Mrs. Ramsey, who is the mother of 8 and the host of the country party. And you get everybody's kind of different perspectives on her. And then the second half takes place years after, when the characters' lives have changed very substantially. The war has unfolded, and I grew to appreciate the writing style as I came to understand, one, who the basic characters were, but also I kind of went into enjoying the descriptive style of it. There's, especially in the second half, a lot of nature descriptions and just scenes that were beautifully described, even if hard to follow. I don't think I got the most out of this because, frankly, it was a little bit beyond my literary depths, but perhaps if you're more accustomed to reading kind of a modernist style, or you're a big fan of lit fic and classics, I'd recommend this. Or if you wanted to book club this, I think this would be a good pick because then you can kind of discuss and unpack it together. So our penultimate book will be this collection of science fiction stories. So I will talk to you from hopefully a less stressed out future. Hello, it is Wednesday morning and we have about 30-ish minutes before we have to leave for the airport. So I'm just going to check in with you really quickly. I'm about halfway through this collection and so far I've liked 2 of like the 7-ish that I've read. So this has some that are more dystopian, some that are more fantastical, some that are more what I would consider traditional sci-fi. I would keep going except for, again, I have to leave and my suitcases are absolutely stuffed. So I'm going to leave this here and hopefully pick this back up the next time I'm in Cartagena. This one for now is a did not finish and to be continued. Hello! Had a complete change of location, and I realized as I was starting to edit this video that I never really filmed an outro. Sorry about that. Here it goes. For the reading challenge of reading 5 books in 5 days, I read about 3.5, and I decided to cut it there because I'm here with my family and I want to just enjoy time without worrying about reading a book quickly. And the challenge served its purpose. I felt like I got a good balance in my last few days in Cartagena between logistical tasks and fun reading ones. And thank you for coming with me.